Hans Danuser, born 1953 in Chur. In the early 70s, assistant to commercial photographer Michael Lieb, followed by artistic and photophysics experiments at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. His interests are now moving more towards space-related and installation projects. His studio is in Zurich.
A Zelle, Bölleschelle.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tinker by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Und redlich dus. Eines der wichtigsten
One of the most important or most exciting moments of our cultural history is the history of decisions. How, where, and when did one decide? And what came out of it? If you weren't able to decide, nothing would happen. You have to decide.
Muss sich entscheiden.
It looks as though Danuser is measuring the landscape photographically, without much point. Rubble, stone, and above all, slate sand.
Der Schiefer kann von
The slate can be from very hard, stone-like, to a disintegration into the finest powder, like graphite.
wie Graphit.
So you have
Also
all
man
the
hat
structures you could wish for.
sämtliche Strukturen, die man sich wünschen kann. Dann die
Then the
Farbigkeit
color
des
of slate.
Schiefers. Entspricht
It resembles
in etwa der
approximately the
Farbe,
color of my
die ich
prints
bei
that I
meinen
have on silver
Abzügen
bromide
auf
paper.
Silberbromidpapier habe.
A single picture doesn't tell a story. First, it's the sequence that results in a flow. A story maybe, but without a beginning or end. A room affects the picture affects the room. Danuser looks for the precise relationship between them both.
Es ist
It is an experiment to measure something, to get to know something.
Cartography hat immer
Cartography
den Anspruch,
always claims
etwas
to own
auszubesitzen,
something,
eine
to give an
Orientierung
orientation.
zu geben. Und wenn ich mit diesen Elementen
And when I work
der
with these cartographic
Kartografie
elements in an
arbeite,
area
einem
which is
Bereich,
actually
der sich
permanently
eigentlich
moving,
permanent in Bewegung
it results in
befindet,
friction.
so gibt es eine Reibung.
After the next storm, this landscape won't be the same as now. When you're near enough and look long and hard enough, suddenly you see movement in the landscape which seems to be motionless. We believe we're standing on solid ground, yet the ground moves, usually so slowly that we don't notice it. Danuser records the movement photographically.
Man darf nicht von Beginn weg einen
You
eine
mustn't find the
Verhältnismäßigkeit
proportions right from the
finden, ob es nah
outset
oder fern
as to
ist.
whether it is near or far.
Es öffnet dem Betrachter
It
die
opens up for the
eigene
spectator his
Sicht.
own view, and
Und
then
es
it is
dann
like
wie ein
skimming
Gefühl.
over.
Man kann selbst sich
You can
dann
move and get your
bewegen,
bearings, and then in the end generate your own
orientieren
pictures
und
for
dann
yourself.
letztlich die eigenen Bilder für sich generieren.
In 1999, Danuser was invited to a competition for art and construction at the psychiatric clinic in Beverin. He didn't actually suggest a work of art. He convinced the jury with an architectural operation. Danuser created a large space as the center of the clinic, a stage made of slate. He describes his work not as art and construction, but as art in architecture. His preoccupation with slate continues unexpectedly.
In retrospect, you could say that it's all in one photograph, particularly when, for instance, it rains lightly. Then there is a reflection. You see the landscape represented like a picture.
In 1989, Danuser completed his 10-year cycle In Vivo. It's a concentration of 93 photos, black and white, divided into 7 series. They are pictures from the taboo and conflict areas of modern society in the 1980s. He chose places where secrecy poses a threat. Genetic research, atomic energy, gold trading, Danuser attempts to follow the trail of life after death.
This work did not result in a larger abstraction, but rather a focus, a coming closer.
Frozen embryo or frozen life. What we see is stiff water.
Interestingly enough, ice always assumes a brightness, even white. Ice as such is crystals and takes on a color according to the background of the base. Over these layers of different crystals, I am drawn down to a depth which opens up a room for the observer and represents this expanse, where your own thoughts are set in motion.
I think
that with these objects that I photograph and the material I use, I reach a colorfulness which is not black and white, but light and dark and colored.
To
start out on the Frozen Embryo series was an exciting project for me. On the one hand, the architecture, and on the other, the art history. Opposite is Augusto Giacometti, and it is interesting how there is a dialogue there. I think from all three, from Giacometti's pictures, from the architecture, and also from the Frozen Embryo series.
Wie auch von der Frozen Embryo Series.
Hans Danuser does not hang his pictures on the wall anymore. He gives them a place in the room as three-dimensional installations, and so investigates what photography can do besides merely reproduction.
Das ist sicher vorne.
In Danuser's pictures, there's literally no bottom and no top, nor a defined close-up or distant view. You have to find your own orientation. You can lose yourself. Feel free.
The nature of my work is very simple. It is a document. I use mostly an ordinary objective. I look at something, I take a picture, and afterwards I make an enlargement.
Hans Danuser, born 1953 in
came out of it. If you weren't able to decide, nothing would happen. You have to decide.
It looks as though Danuser is measuring the landscape photographically, without much point. Rubble, stone, and above all, slate sand.
The slate catch a tinker by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. One of the most important or most exciting moments of our cultural history is the history of decisions. How, where, and when did one decide? And what can be from very hard, stone-like, to a disintegration into the finest powder like graphite. So you have all the structures you could wish for. Then the color of slate. It resembles approximately the color of my prints that I have on silver bromide paper.
In the early 70s, assistant to commercial photographer Michael Lieb, followed by artistic and photophysics experiments at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. His interests are now moving more towards space-related and installation projects. His studio is in Zurich.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.